Hello and welcome to this video on market equilibrium. In this video, we're going to look at what it means. We're going to look at how shifts in demand and supply can cause prices to change, and then explain how market forces eliminate excess supply and excess demand. So far in our series of videos, we've looked at demand and supply separately. And we're going to consider here an example. We're going to consider here an example of these delicious baked products. So if we think about the demand for them and we think about the supply for them, we would think about the supply curve and the demand curve. And this tells us the relationship between price and quantity for consumers in terms of demand and for producers in terms of supply. And what we can see interestingly here is that there is a point where the two curves meet. And at this point here, the price is €5 and the quantity demanded and quantity supplied would be 10,000 of these delicious baked products. So here we have quite a stable position. At a price of €5, the amount people want to buy, demand, is the same as the amount that people, businesses want to sell, bakeries want to sell. And so we describe this as being the equilibrium point. At this position here in this market, at this price, the amount people want to buy is equal to the amount that the bakeries want to sell. And so we call this the market clearing price because all products are sold at this price and no products are left over. The market clearing price is the price at which demand equals supply. So let's now change the scenario and let's imagine a shift in demand. Well, we've looked previously that these factors can cause a shift in demand. So here's our marketplace, and let's imagine that there was a change in demand, people's incomes fell. So as a result, there was a reduction in demand for baked goods. This would be indicated by, on our diagram, of a demand shifting in or shifting to the left. Now what happens in this situation, we can see that actually the market price has moved. It is no longer at €5. It now is where the two meet at a lower price. This might be €4, where the quantity bought and sold is now 8,000. So the price would fall until a new equilibrium price is reached, where supply curve crosses the new demand curve. Now let's look at supply. We've looked previously that these would cause shifts in supply. Let's imagine here that the bakers have been given a subsidy, and this reduces the cost of production. The impact of this is it shifts the supply curve to the right or out. What will be the impact here on the equilibrium, the market clearing price? Well, it would decrease from P to P1, and there'll be an increase in quantity bought and sold, Q to Q1. So we've looked at what market equilibrium price is, and we've looked at how shifts in demand and supply change the price. We're now going to go a little bit deeper into this and look at how market forces are causing this price to change. So let's imagine our scenario again. We've got our demand and supply for baked goods. And we're going to say, right, there's a fall in demand. Now, what does that create, that fall in demand? Well, actually, if we think about it in terms of demand, what is happening is that when demand decreases, if the price was still 5, we would have 6,000 that people would want to buy. But a price of 5, as we already know, the bakeries would want to sell 10,000. So the bakeries would be making 10,000 to sell, but there would only be demand for 6,000 products from customers. So this would create a situation where we would have a surplus of baked products. There will be a surplus here of 4,000 of these delicious baked products. And we describe that as being excess supply. The bakery at a price of €5 would be making 10,000 and wishing to sell them, but there would only be demand now for 6,000. So there's excess supply, too many are being made. Now in that situation, if we had excess supply, what would we expect to happen to the price of one of these baked products? If there's a surplus of 4,000, what we would expect is for the price actually to slowly move and decrease down towards an equilibrium level. So we'd expect the price to fall until it reached €4, at which point there is no excess supply anymore, because at €4, the amount demanded equals the quantity that is being supplied. So surpluses, also known as excess supply, cause the equilibrium price to fall. Now let's look at a slightly different scenario. Let's imagine that demand increased. Well, what's happening here in the first instance is if the price was €5 and there was an increase in demand, well, people would want to buy 14,000 of these baked products because that's what the new demand curve tells us. But the bakeries would only be planning to produce 10,000 at a price of €5. So how would we describe this situation? Well, we would say at this situation, there is a shortage of 4,000. The quantity demanded is 14,000. The quantity being produced is only 10,000. So our market is not in equilibrium. There is not a clearing price here because there is a shortage of 4,000 of these baked products. Now, what would we expect to happen if there's a shortage, if more people want to buy them? There's demand for 14,000, but only 10,000 exists. We would expect the price to rise to eliminate this excess demand. And we would expect the price to rise to such an extent that at €6, now the quantity demanded, 12,000, would equal the quantity that bakeries would make at that price. And so again, our new clearing price has been established and the excess demand has been removed. So shortages, also known as excess demand, cause the equilibrium price to rise. We can have a look at changes in supply as well. For example, the bakery has given, the bakers have received a subsidy. This would shift supply curve to the right. Would there be a surplus or a shortage? There would be a surplus. More would be being produced at a current price P. So what would we expect to happen if there's a surplus? We would expect the price to, that's right, we'd expect the price to fall to P1. What if there was a poor wheat harvest and it's destroyed crops and reduced the supply to the market? Well, that would shift supply to the left. If the price was still to stay at P, would we have a surplus or a shortage? Well, in a situation, we'd have a shortage. And if we had a shortage, what would you expect to happen to the price? Well, in this situation, we'd expect the price to rise to P1. So in this video, we've looked at what is meant by market equilibrium, how shifts in demand and supply change the equilibrium, and how the market forces of excess supply and excess demand cause that price to change. A quick moral of the story: market forces are always pushing prices towards the market equilibrium. If there's too much supply, this leads to lower prices. If there's too much demand, this leads to higher prices. Where demand is equal to supply, we have the market equilibrium price. So when there is not an equilibrium price, market forces tend to push us in that direction until we reach the market equilibrium. That's it. Thanks for listening.